Hey, I was going to start painting a new canoe, so I decided to share it with you guys, do a live video here, and I just wanted to show you the canoe that I'm going to be painting. So this is it here. So this canoe was carved by a friend of mine. His name is Maurice Linglet. So he carved this out of yellow cedar. As you can see, it's about 16 inches long, and I've got the design. You can see it's already transferred on. So basically the way that I did this was I came up with this. First of all, I did a rough drawing. So this is a Seasealth design, and this is the third Seasealth design that I've done, and it's something I like to draw. It's a mythical sea serpent, and it has really it's really powerful. It can change shape. It can change itself into a canoe, and it can actually move itself through the water. It can turn a man to stone by looking at him. It's also used as a symbol of protection. So sometimes you'll see canoes with the Seasealth design painted onto it to protect the people that are in the canoe. Sometimes you would see them on longhouses or big houses, also as a form of protection. It would be painted over the doorway, so it would protect people that would go through it. And it's kind of a fun design to play around with. And I wanted to do something fairly simple since the last design that I came up with. If you haven't seen the other canoes that I painted recently, they were basically, I painted the 4 clans. I had the words Highslaw on one side and then Nation on the other. And I tried to keep that design simple, but it was actually pretty complicated. It was pretty tough to paint. So this design, it's a little bit simpler. So I'm hoping it won't take me a month to paint this canoe like I did with the other ones. And so I've got the printout here. So what I did was I came up with a rough drawing. So I just sketched out a quick drawing on paper. I scanned that into my computer. I imported it into my graphics program, and I built a vector graphic on top of that. So it's a much cleaner design than the original hand sketch, and it wasn't quite able to fit the whole design onto. This is actually a tabloid size sheet of paper. This was 11 by 17. So you can see the ends here cut off a little bit, but that was all I was able to fit onto the page, since it is kind of a larger model canoe. So I've got the printout, and basically what I did was I put the printout on the canoe. So I taped it on, and I basically used this here. So this is carbon paper, and I basically fit the carbon paper beneath between my printout here and the canoe. So as I drew, it would transfer the line onto the canoe. And this was originally just bare wood. It had been sanded, but I actually sealed it before I started drawing the design on. So it has a really nice smooth finish already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start painting. This is a red and black design. So black form lines, the secondary features, the split U forms, will be in a darker red. I decided to go darker red. I usually like to use a bright red, but with this one, I figured going darker red would be, I think it suited it more. So I'm going to start with that. And so as I'm painting, I've got some music that I'm going to play. This was, if you saw my previous video, the last canoe that I painted, the soundtrack that was playing underneath there, that was music that I wrote and recorded. So I'm just going to play that as I'm painting here. So I've got this set up on my MP3 player here. So I'm going to bring this up. I'll turn that up a little bit. Have nice background music playing while I'm painting here. I'm just going to try and make some room. Oh, something else. I've been doing a lot of testing. So as I mentioned, I like using brighter reds when I'm painting. I've been testing different types of darker reds. So you can see here, that's basically what I've done here. So I've got the black in the middle. And I just experimented with different types of darker red. I eventually went with this one here. So this one is just basically called maroon. And I'm not sure if you can see here, but I've actually varnished this already, because when I painted the darker red on here, when it dried, it actually looked kind of dull. And I wanted to have kind of a nicer, smoother finish to it. So this is a satin finish, and so this is something I like to do before I start painting anything, especially on wood. I just want to make sure that I know what's going to happen, because if you look on this side here, I used a different type of varnish, and you can see that it's smeared all over the place. So that's why I test. I test before I do any painting, so something like this doesn't happen. So I'm glad I tested this out, so now I know what's going to happen here. So that's basically the red that's going to be on this canoe. I'm going to start with the black, the foam lines. And I'm just going to move my phone here. Actually, this is my phone, this is my iPod. I tried going live on my phone, but it wouldn't work for some reason. So got my iPod going here, so I'm going to set this up so you can see as I'm painting. I'm just going to move this. So I'm just going to adjust this, move this, tilt this up a little more so you can see the canoe. I have to move this a little bit closer. I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see this, but I'm going to get started. So I'm using black acrylic paint, and when I'm painting, what I like to do is I like to start around the edges, and I usually kind of like to start in the middle. So I'm going to start with this head design here in the middle. And since I'm left-handed, I usually start on the left-hand side and then I move to the right, so that as I'm painting, whatever I started is going to be dry by the time I get to the other side here. So that's something that I like to do. So I'll get started here. Try and get a good angle. It's a little hard to see what I'm doing here. I'm going to move this so I can actually get the light. I was getting shadow from my hand here, so. So when I'm painting, I always start at the edge. Get a nice clean line going around the outside. I also try to smooth out the paint as much as I can. I don't like having kind of big globs of paint. So I try to flatten out the paint itself as I'm going. I also like to do multiple coats. This paint that I'm using, this is Mars Black. It actually is a very thick, opaque black paint. But sometimes one coat isn't quite enough. You do get the background showing through a little bit sometimes. So I might have to do 2 coats, but I'm going to start with this first coat here. I also wet my brush a little bit before I put more paint on my brush. So as mentioning before, I use Mars Black. I find it's the best paint to use for this type of painting, where you got really solid shapes, you want clean lines, and you want flat color. The other type of black that Liquitex makes is called Ivory Black. Don't use that for native painting. Do not use Ivory Black. It is very thin. It's slightly transparent. You're going to have to paint about 5 or 6 coats to get an actual solid base. So usually with the Mars Black, you get a nice even coat of just solid black. So yeah, I'm seeing a little bit of the wood showing through. So when I'm finished painting this first coat of black, I'm going to have to do another coat on top of that. And when I was testing my darker red paint, I noticed that it was a little bit thin. So when I did my test, I actually applied 3 coats and got a fairly solid coat. So I'll have to do 2 coats of black, 3 coats of red. And when I finish that, I'm just going to apply a satin varnish over top of it. And I'm using polyurethane. I use water-based polyurethane because it's easier to use. It's a lot easier to clean up. With oil-based varnishes, you have to use paint thinner to actually clean it up, and paint thinner smells very strong. So the water-based varnishes are a lot easier to clean up. You just use water. So now I'm making my way up to the top of the head, and as you can see, I'm starting from the edges. So if I have a shape that is fairly wide, I'll paint the outlines first, and then I fill in the middle. I'll turn this way. Maybe you can see better from there. So I usually dip my brush into some water to kind of thin the paint out a little bit before I put it on, because that makes it a little bit easier to get clean lines. The thing is, you can thin it down a little too much and it gets too watery. So sometimes I'll just dab my paintbrush onto a paper towel to kind of soak up the excess water before I actually dip it into the paint. So you can see I'm starting from one edge, then going down to the other edge across from it. Getting quite a bit of glare from the light, so I'm trying to find a good angle so I can see what I'm doing clearly, and so that you can see what I'm doing. So painting, this kind of painting is a very slow process. You have to have a lot of patience to try and paint this way. It takes a lot of patience, a lot of skill. And this is actually one of the reasons why I prefer to do computer graphics, is it takes a long time for me to finish a computer graphic, about the same time as it would take for me to do a complete painting. But after I'm finished my computer graphic, I'll be able to, when I get my printing equipment, I'll be able to basically reproduce each design almost as much as I want. But when I'm finished a painting, I'm just left with that one painting. That's it. It's very time consuming. And as I mentioned, it takes a lot of concentration. It's actually pretty tiring. After about an hour of doing this, I'm kind of wiped out already at that point. So you can see I started on this edge, and I've got this edge. I'm going to paint that in the space in between them later on. And painting a three-dimensional object is a little awkward, because I like to have my hand planted down. It gives me a lot more control over my paintbrush. But as you can see, this is a kind of a smaller object, and it's rounded as well. So I don't really have any flat surfaces that I can comfortably anchor my hand onto. I'm also having to tilt it a lot so I can see, I can get a, so it doesn't, I don't get as much glare coming from the light. That's tricky as well. Okay, so this top line is actually a little bit messy, so I'm going to clean this up. Just so I get a nice smooth line going across there. And you can see here that I have, this is going to be black too, this ear, the form line for the ear. And I'm just going to leave that for now. I just want this main shape here. So I started off with an ovoid for the head. So I'm going to go around the whole edge of the head, and then I'll paint the ears. So these are going to be black. The inside parts there are going to be red. These split U-forms. Eyes are going to be black. Nose, mouth, all that will be black. And I'm going to paint the black first, and then once I'm finished that, then I'll start on the red. So I'm not sure how long this is going to take me. I think I'll just end the video here, because watching somebody paint is so interesting at first, but I don't think it's really all that exciting to sit there and kind of watch somebody. The video that I made before, I recorded the whole process from beginning to end, and I ended up with about 9 hours of video. So sitting there watching 9 hours of video probably isn't that exciting. And I edited it down, so I actually sped up some of the clips. So basically condensed 9 hours down to about half an hour. But I can't really do that when I'm live. So yeah, so that's pretty much it for now. I'm gonna continue painting, and I might do another video sometime later. I'm not sure when. We'll see how things go. So until next time, I'll see you later.